Everyone, listeners, friends, countrymen, welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. Although, he's even less with me than usual, aren't you, Phil? Far from the Anglo shores of our shared linguistic homeland, you have traveled to the Aegean Sea to seek the lost treasure of Odysseus. I don't know. I don't know.
I think I've gone to seek the one true treasure we've all found recently. Gone to the birthplace of democracy. And we've seen democracy in action these past few weeks. And it's been a wonderful thing to see. And, you know, I thought I would celebrate that.
Huh? Oh, you're done?
Yeah, maybe not.
You done? Okay. All right. Oh, okay.
I'm not going to come out with any more hideous centrist spiel for you.
Yeah, I guess we should just say it. I overslept for our recording time today. It was a different earlier time. Don't tell them what time it was, Phil. They can't know it's possible for a man to oversleep at that hour. And basically, in order to punish me, Phil just sent me all of the most obnoxious Twitter content imaginable. Tweets from Pete Buttigieg. Tweet from George W. Bush. Just a whole unpleasant list for me to come back to as recompense. So actually, I just want to start the show by saying that even though I made Phil wait a very long time this afternoon/evening, I don't care. I don't feel bad. And we're now ready to bring to you this week's edition of Heavy Hands. We took one look ahead of us at this upcoming card and thought, you know what? That Zane Simon may be an idiot, but he may be onto something here. This is not good. And then bizarrely, Phil, it actually got significantly more interesting with the loss of its initial main event. It was supposed to be Islam Makhachev versus Rafael dos Anjos. And I think the question that we're going to probably ask at the top of this breakdown would not have been nearly as compelling in that one. That one to me felt much more like okay, Makhachev is being set up to win this fight. He's, the promoters have identified RDA is declined, yada, yada, yada. Now's the time to get Makhachev this name value on his resume, and then we can move him up. Which, I like Islam Makhachev. I'd rather just see him fight, like good opposition, in more competitive seeming matchups. This is now Paul Felder versus Rafael dos Anjos. That is now next weekend's main event. And to me, that is way more enticing simply because it seems way more competitive. Way more difficult to just draw out clean lines of who actually will command that fight. So, I don't know. Do you feel more or less the same way, Phil?
Yeah, pretty much. And yeah, watching tape on these guys.
Let me just say real quick before we get into it, we're going to talk also about the old man, Glover Teixeira. He saved the restaurant. He did it last weekend. Hani Barcelos versus Khalid Taha was every fucking bit as good as we told you it was going to be, and then some. We're going to talk about that and whatever else from last weekend's card later in the show. But first, RDA Felder. Phil, continue.
Yeah, this is one of those fights where I think briefly checking out tape for it has not really clarified for me who I particularly think is going to win.
Yeah.
But it has made me think that the fight's going to be a lot more fun.
Yeah.
Because I think this is probably going to be one of those fights which kind of goes everywhere in one of the best ways. Paul Felder, like many lightweight strikers specifically, has not really been tested by wrestlers that much. The traditional dynamic in these kind of weight classes where they are super deep and you can afford to do this kind of thing is to have your strikers fight one wrestler maybe and then be like, okay, they've passed that test. Let's make sure they never have to do it again.
Yeah. And to be fair, Paul Felder passed one of the most strenuous wrestler-grappler tests in the division in one of the least convincing ways ever.
Yep.
So
Incredibly dumb.
he's had only the one wrestler fight. It's a very impressive one, but very difficult to know what to take away from it. We're talking, of course, about his fight with Charles Oliveira, who I had forgotten.
No! I was thinking further back. I was thinking about his fight with Danny Castillo, which was also incredibly unconvincing in a completely different way.
That's true. Just nothing happens until a giant spinning back fist. Pretty much. Okay, all right. Well, you're thinking of that one. I'm thinking of the Oliveira one, which I had forgotten completely until watching it just now, how utterly dire the beginning of that fight is for Paul Felder. Like, that wasn't just a, hey, remember that time Paul Felder played in dangerous territory and got the win? It was like Paul Felder was losing. He was distinctly losing for the first 3.5 minutes of the fight.
He was within inches of, being finished.
Taken down almost like within the first 30 seconds. Like mounted, put into a Darce choke, which he battles for like 1.5 minutes straight. And as soon as he escapes that, he's back mounted. Like, that is how that fight begins. So yeah. What does that say about RDA? I don't know. Like, if it wasn't Charles Oliveira, who fucking knows what would have happened in that fight? Is that how you feel about the Danny Castillo one as well?
I mean, the Danny Castillo one was, it was a pretty unfortunate one for Felder because it sort of played into a lot of his strengths in that, like, Danny Castillo isn't the most physical fighter. Felder's pretty physical, and Felder finished him in a kind of meme-friendly way, which meant that they were then like, wow, he's finished someone whilst not even being a wrestler. He must be a great striker. And then they just put him in with strikers that he had no business fighting for, like...
the classic misconception that the guy who just impressively outstruck the wrestler should now be dominant in striker versus striker matchups as well. Actually, to now that you mention it, I remember, like, my earliest conception of Paul Felder was kind of as a classic anti-wrestler striker. Which is strange, given that he has just not fought many effective wrestlers in this division. But I do kind of think he's good at it,
Yeah, I think that's what makes this fight interesting, because he has flavors of things that RDA has struggled with, not the exact, like, recipe. He's a big physical guy, which is, RDA is always someone who tries to force a physical game on his opponent.
Yeah.
And RDA has struggled with being outmuscled. Felder is someone who, we've spoken a lot about the fact that he is kind of often more of a grappler than a striker. I mean, maybe not in his last few fights. I think he's really rounded that out much more lately. But, he really has relied on the clinch and ground and pound to get things done.
Yeah. I also think he hasn't been able to take the likes of Barboza and Hooker down that easily either. But yeah, he loves to do it. He basically, it's kind of a characteristic of both these guys. Basically, given the chance, they're going to take you down.
So, but he's, as mentioned, he was also someone with the kind of savvy on the ground that meant that he could get out from Charles Oliveira's back control.
Yeah.
He could escape that dart so that he was happy and able to go back into the guard of Oliveira. The question is, can he repeat these kind of tricks on RDA? Is he just, is he big and powerful like Michael Chiesa so that he can just have a striking match, and if it gets into like a wrestling exchange, he'll just be able to either overpower RDA or just be able to overpower him, or he'll be able to escape from control positions, and then because he's presumably younger and less shot-worn, he'll be out ahead on the cardio equation. And I think the question there, it basically comes down to the question that we asked ourselves before we started recording this, is RDA shot?
Right.
Or, to clarify it slightly, how shot is RDA?
Yeah, who was the last person that all the vaping scooter gang kids. Seb was shot, and I made fun of them recently. Do you recall?
And it must have been on like the last card.
Yeah, no, or it was like 2 before. There was somebody that I was like, I don't see why they think he's shot. This guy, they just think he's shot. Oh, Whitaker, of course. That's why you don't remember. I talked about it with Ed.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Who's the one other member, and there's no one else. There's no one else who's part of that who will be upset if I don't mention him. He's the one other member of that team who thought that correctly, that Robert Whitaker was not shot. I mean, I think I tend to that tends to just be, as much as they have their one size fits all. Oh God, a fighter I like lost. He's shot. Tick. I tend to just do the opposite, right? You have to show me your shot. Usually before I'm going to start saying it, or really even like allowing myself to really worry about it. And I think the only reason at the time we thought it was such a terrible performance from RDA was simply that this doesn't sound as profound as I thought it did, that it was Michael Chiesa who beat him.
I mean, I really think that's genuinely like a salient point.
I mean, it's like me saying the only reason I thought it was bad is that a bad guy beat him.
But I mean, if you literally like turned Michael Chiesa's performance from that into a wireframe, and then like pasted it over a better fighter, like people would not, or someone that we thought was a better fighter, I don't think people would be saying the same thing. Because it's a legit good performance from Michael Chiesa. It genuinely is. And
it is unusual compared to a lot of other Michael Chiesa performances, which is the thing that is most difficult to wrap my head around. Being so pattern dependent. The fact that Michael Chiesa looks distinctively, shall we say, juicier, which could simply be the product of some really good strength and conditioning. And I, being
very good, yes,
a gullible dullard, believe that. So there's a huge physical disparity that was not expected based on previous Chiesa fights, but I feel pretty comfortable saying that is different in the RDA fight. That was a change that altered the way the fight that fight played out. And then I think there's also the fact that RDA probably also thought Chiesa wasn't very good, and didn't honestly seem all that well prepared for the physicality or even just the game plan. But Chiesa basically, like, how like after Alan Jouban and Santiago Ponzinibbio had done it, even Max Griffin was able to come in and outbox Mike Perry. It had been so well demonstrated by that point. I think Chiesa benefited from the same dynamic. That, like, just everyone, literally 3 of RDA's previous 4 fights were that exact loss in differing forms. So it's like it's on the table. It's if Chiesa comes in strong with that game plan nailed into his head, then it stands to reason that he can beat RDA, because RDA has always lost the same fight. So I'm saying not shot. Getting shotter over time, still old, still aging, but I'm going to say definitively not shot.
Yeah, I'm going to agree. I mean, I think that it is pretty much that. It's a combination of Chiesa looking much better. Like, he was hitting like really good counter double legs, which I've never really seen him do before. Like baiting RDA into shots.
Yep.
And capitalizing, and that was where a lot of his, because no one has ever like been under the illusion that Michael Chiesa getting, like, once he gets you on the ground is not a terrifying force. And that was just, it was the straw that stirred the drink, as Jordan Breen might say. So I think with regards to the Felder fight, I think the late notice makes this really interesting, because I think Felder is very much, I think despite that Oliveira fight, I think he is a thoughtful, tape study type fighter who builds approaches for his opponents. I think the Barboza fight showed that. But you saw him like making him, and I think the Vic fight as well. You saw himself him making himself pressure more because he knew that was the right thing to do.
Right.
RDA, particularly modern RDA, I don't know if there's like a specific game plan you can force yourself into at this kind of stage for him. If you're someone like Felder, I mean, if Felder baits RDA into counter double legs, I'll be incredibly impressed and also pretty amused. Overall, I think like the main person I think is going to be dictating the exchange is probably RDA. Like, I think it takes Felder a long time to trust his jab in these fights.
Yes.
I think RDA is still probably more likely to initiate exchanges.
Yeah.
I think RDA is the real thing which is troubling him lately is his tendency to get backed up into the fence.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like if Paul Felder is not a great chance for him to just come in and say, well, pressuring is the route again. Yeah. I mean, he doesn't do it as immediately as even Michael Chiesa did. Not typically. I mean, I say that only because we've seen, like you said, we've seen Felder come in with the pressuring game plan in the past, most notably to me against Vic, and also but also like against Barboza, he did that, but only really as the fight wore on did it start to be effective. I agree. I don't know if it's just the jab. I think he still starts off from a place where he's always been this kind of plotting, follow you around, wait to see what you're going to do, like overthinking fighter. And he has to shake himself out of that, basically, to be a really effective pressure fighter. So
yeah, I mean, I still think he has a lot of tools that he can bring to bear. You know, he's still got that jab. I think he probably can out-jab RDA if he wants to. But I think the wrestling really does give me cause for concern. Because Felder has given up, hasn't fought many great wrestlers, but he's given up a lot of takedowns, like meaningful takedowns in some ways. Like, you know, he got taken down by Barboza. He got taken down by Trinaldo.
Yeah.
As we said, he got taken down like a couple of times by Oliveira. And he's sort of specifically relied on being big and full of cardio and like scrambling his way out and just sort of overpowering people to get back out again.
And usually, let's be real, toughing it out. Like relying on a certain amount of durability to give him the cushion he needs to start falling into the right adaptations. I mean, while we're on this subject, let's just bring up, I think, the very important point, which is no matter how good Paul Felder is at game planning for opponents, and no matter how good a shape he's in right now, because he was reportedly training for a triathlon, and so is in great physical condition, he was not preparing for RDA. Not until less than a week before the event, as far as we know. So, what do you think Paul Felder does at a default, or do you think maybe that is enough time? Because I do think a lot of Felder's prep that you've identified is like mental, because a lot of it doesn't come through like muscle memory, like the moment the fight begins. A lot of it is like, I prepared for these things, but he still has to convince himself to do them. They're still just thoughts; they're not reflexes. So maybe Paul Felder can still just look at RDA and still work himself. You know, he'll still have 5 rounds potentially to work himself into the right strategy. And it's not like he has to be that worried about RDA just blowing him out before that happens. But I don't know. It's a question worth asking is, will he still look as well prepared? You have to assume no. I don't know.
Yeah, I think we've seen Felder on short notice against an extremely game plannable opponent before, which is Mike Perry.
Right.
Didn't look great.
No.
Looked okay. I mean, I think that was an unfortunate.
That was up a weight. That was up a weight class against a guy who actually like really, really belongs in that weight class too.
Yeah. And also, I think it was just that, like, he was a bit unfortunate that I think he broke his own hand on a spinning back fist or something.
Right.
Or I think it was his forearm.
Yeah. And
he still, there was still an argument that he won it anyway.
Yeah.
But you know, he didn't look fantastic. You would have thought, you know, if you're a striker by trade, you probably want to be able to largely outstrike Mike Perry.
Yeah, right.
if you're a striker and you have like just a really good jab, you should be able to do that.
Yeah, I mean, lucky him, RDA doesn't pressure anymore, right? Because you were saying.
The other thing I wanted to say is, like, with regards to the wrestling, it's worth thinking of how RDA versus, say, Oliveira go for things. Oliveira is obviously a much more dynamic ground fighter than RDA is. He's much more likely to finish people. RDA, should he get top position on people, doesn't let it go. Right. He's not gonna set up risky submissions in order to give up position or take the back. He's just gonna like lock you down into half guard and then like pound on you for a bit, and he'll take an arm triangle if you give it to. He'll pass and take an arm triangle if you give it to him. But he's never gonna let you up if he can.
Right.
I mean, he has absolutely destroyed people who have made their games like being like, oh, I'm going to be a jiu-jitsu guy and we're going to exchange positions from the bottom like Nate Diaz.
Yes.
So I do think that like wrestling is something that I would, and like you said, like these are both guys that go for takedowns a lot. Specifically RDA, he always tries to get takedowns back.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why he has problems with specific style matchups. But I think in this matchup, like, I don't think Felder's tendency to scramble out of ground positions is going to be his friend.
No. I mean, I agree that Felder is a very impressive grappler, but like just falling back on my good old-fashioned MMA math here, like, I distinctly remember being at the event live, actually, where Dos Anjos fought Donald Cerrone the first time, and seeing towards the end of the first round, after Dos Anjos gets that big pivotal knockdown that really sets the tone for the fight. End of the first round, as I recall, he finishes a takedown, and at the time, in my young foolish MMA fan, my just bleed brain, I'm like, ooh, you know what? This Donald Cerrone, pretty damn good on the ground. I want to see what happens here. And then, like, this smug little MMA guy next to me is like, he's not going to out-grapple RDA. And no, he did not. He actually just got schooled on the ground. Donald Cerrone, a very, very strong jiu-jitsu player in MMA. It's always been a very effective part of his game. He may still have way more submissions than he does actual knockouts. And RDA just cut through him. So,
yeah, I mean, Anthony Pettis,
of course. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a particularly good. Like, I mean, I know like Felder's game is not the same as theirs. He's not a submit off the back guy. He's a scramble back to the feet or reverse position guy, which will make things, I think, interesting. I don't think it's, I think against RDA, you just really, really want the wrestling edge against RDA.
Right. I mean, he's a lot on the ground of all these recent opponents. I guess he's the most like Kevin Lee, right? Who did lose. I mean, I think Paul Felder has maybe a little better gas than that, but I also don't know that it could possibly hold up to RDA's for 5 rounds.
On short notice.
On short notice, yeah, but in shape. But yeah, I believe we have just talked me into picking RDA.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm gonna pick RDA as well. I mean, I think like if RDA is physically declined, I think it's not in terms of durability. He's not getting knocked out easily.
Yeah.
It's going to be in physicality. It's going to be in strength.
It's also the worrying thing is it's also in pulling the trigger.
Yeah,
that's definitely been a thing that has slipped for RDA.
But I think Felder has to convince himself to be aggressive, and I think he has to convince himself to set high paces.
Yeah, do you think he'll let RDA ease himself into the striking rhythm in this one?
Yeah, that's what I generally think. But I mean, this is the thing. Like I've picked a lot of like RDA things because I think that he just has like a stylistic edge here, but I still think this is going to be a super close fight. And I think it's going to be just because, like I said, I think it's gonna go everywhere. I think Felder's the size and physicality edge will balance out against some of, I think, RDA's just like technical edges, and the fact that Felder, I think, is still more likely to pull the trigger than RDA is.
Yeah.
But I think it's really the grappling for me. I think the fight. If I think that the fight's going to go everywhere, I'm just like, how many people have ever beaten RDA without being like actually genuinely a better grappler than him?
Yeah. Even though it feels scary to have just watched that unexpected result in the Chiesa fight, and then to be like, well, this guy's not going to beat RDA because he's not going to out-wrestle him. It does, it's Paul Felder.
Yeah.
No disrespect whatsoever. It's not Michael Chiesa. It's not even in his stylistic wheelhouse to chase takedowns with the same kind of tenacity. And I'm ready to be just as surprised. If Paul Felder comes in and out-grapples him and looks like 3 times physically bigger and all of this, I will be just as surprised as when Chiesa did it, and that's fine. I'm ready to be surprised if that happens, but
I'm also like, even though, we obviously like our old men on this show, I'd be really happy to see Paul Felder win because it's such a gutsy thing to do.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he is inarguably in a much higher position. I mean, because normally when people do these things in these kind of fights, they try and fight up the ranks.
Yep.
No, they're like, oh, I'll jump in and fight this guy 10 places above me. It's like, yeah, why wouldn't you? But I think he's inarguably in a higher position in the lightweight rankings than RDA is, even, not just numerically, but, people could argue that he beat Dan Hooker, who is, I think, top 5.
Mm-hmm.
And, no one thinks that was a clear win by Hooker.
And he's still got a relatively recent win over Oliveira, who has done nothing but improve his stock since that fight.
Yeah, I mean, so Felder himself has said that he's towards the end of his career.
Yeah.
So I would also be, perfectly happy to see him, get a big, like, momentum building win at this stage.
Sure.
For taking such a, especially for taking such a, gutsy gamble.
Maybe he talked to one of the vaping scooter guys, and they were like, no, dude, trust me, RDA is fucking done. He's finished. Completely shot. He looks like shit. He's never going to win a fight again. And he was like, all right, I guess now's my moment.
Yep.
Yes, well, I agree. I mean, who doesn't like Paul Felder? Everyone likes Paul Felder. I agree. I think I still don't feel good picking RDA. Okay, let's stop waffling about it. Let's take a break, because when we come back, we are going to talk, I think, really quite briefly about 2 other fights in this card, one of which may in fact force the UFC to remove a card from the schedule so that we can record an MMA Depressed Us about it. We're going to talk about that and another one, and then Santos versus Teixeira after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Let's do it.
All right, we're back. We're back on Heavy Hands. Oh God, what are we talking about? Shit, what card is this? Oh yeah, Safarov versus... Just saying that as if it's like a real fight that I remembered. Safarov versus Julian Marquez. Absolute meme quality fight. Go ahead, Phil, break it down.
So when we were talking about this fight, I was I was like, what does Safarov actually do? Because the thing is,
yeah,
when you think about this guy, first thing that just jumps into your mind is general feeling of disgust.
Yeah.
And just the thought of like a blizzard of fouls.
Yeah. Just a sort of a moral and physical repellent.
Yeah. And then you watch his fights, and it's really hard to come away with anything more than that.
Yeah. Yeah. I would describe his fighting style as disgusting. I think that's the accurate way to put it. Yeah, we were watching his fight with Nicolai Negumereanu, which is his one win in the UFC. And I'm just like watching Negumereanu like lose will as Safarov spends more and more time on top of him. And I am 100% sympathetic the entire time I'm seeing this happen. I'm like, this guy's fighting style looks like it smells.
Yeah.
It looks unpleasant. He looks sticky or greasy. It's hard to say what substance he's coated in.
He has a sort of trapped rodent quality to the way that he fights. Like, there is a strong, pungent sense of desperation the way Safarov goes about his business.
Safarov's training regimen is being trapped under a stainless steel mixing bowl, which against the stomach of his sparring partner. His trainer then holds a lighter up to the bowl so that he has to eat his way through his training partner's belly in order to survive. And he looks great. It really prepares him for some sensational performances.
And Julian Marquez is probably going to beat him up, right?
Yeah. This is why did we decide to talk about this?
Because it's funny.
It's a complete mess.
Yeah, Julian Marquez is similarly kind of like, he doesn't really have a big amount of structure to his game. He's just a violent guy, and in that way, I think this fight could be pretty fun.
Oh yeah, it's gonna rule.
Safarov is an all right wrestler as far as these things go. Marquez isn't the greatest takedown defender, but is just someone who will consistently keep fighting. And I mean, he's probably just got like a power and consistency edge that Safarov just can't match. Like, he had a really tough fight against Chirico, but was like still just walking him down at the end.
Yep.
So yeah, he's probably going to be the rat catcher today.
Yeah.
But, guess we had to hit this one because we don't know how long Safarov's still going to be in the UFC for.
This will likely be it. You know, if he loses, I hope not. He's so worth watching.
Mm-hmm.
He's just so detestable. Yeah, I mean, even likewise, Marquez had quite a war with Darren Stewart, who we now know is both very, very powerful and very, very tough, and also, has to be like drawn into a war to be at his most effective, and that's all Julian Marquez did with him. Was just start going to battle. And other than Darren Stewart just taking him down at will, I think he was quite competent in that one. So yeah, it seems like it would be crazy not to pick Julian Marquez because he's like kind of good at certain aspects of MMA. Whereas like Safarov, Marquez himself is a bit of a brawler, but Safarov is like legit brawler. There's like a certain zone around him that if you step into it, he's going to swing something kind of ugly. I will give him credit. At times, the guy has a jab, and a counter left hook. I think you have to be as bad as Nicolai Negumereanu to walk into them consistently, though. And then otherwise, you can just sort of like tie up with him, and most people he's fought have kind of been able to just fling him around. Because yeah, if you can get past the odor, there's not that much left to Safarov to really overpower you. So
yeah, I mean, if you're getting tossed around by Tyson Pedro, there are probably some issues here.
Yeah. Now Marquez will like go in there and go to war, and if he doesn't kill him, he'll gas.
Mm-hmm.
So like it stands a good chance of becoming a mess. But yeah, it's gonna be a banger. I'm picking Julian Marquez. I don't see why you would do anything else. Lord knows
I'm also picking him.
I'll be rooting for the Stink Man though. God knows it. Stink Man versus Smack Man. Come on. I know he deserves way better right now, and he just called out or just got a fight with Jack Hermanson, our boy Kevin Holland, which is amazing. But he should really at some point fight Safarov just for fun.
Yeah, he really should. I do want to see it.
Alrighty. Okay. What else was there from this? Oh yeah. Oops, I've got an alarm going off somewhere. Our much anticipated fight between Ian Heinisch and Brendan Allen did not happen. And I got to say, I was really looking forward to that one. I thought it was, after you and I talked about it, Phil, I realized like what a perfectly matched fight it was. And so I'm very sad to have lost it, but the boy Sean Strickland has stepped in to replace what's the guy's name that I just said who just got withdrawn from the fight? Ian Heinisch.
Heinisch.
Yeah, I just kept trying to grab his name, and Brendan just kept coming into my head. It was the only one of the two names I could recall. Sean Strickland has now stepped in. I came in pretty down on this one at the start of our recording, Phil, and you gave me a bit of pushback. So I'm going to let you explain to me why Sean Strickland is, in fact, a similarly enticing matchup with Brendan
Who doesn't
Allen.
want to see Dark Side Sean Strickland again?
Yeah, right. Sean Strickland with the piece of whatever came back with him.
Yeah. But more than that, like, this is... it doesn't have the same, like, stylistic entertainment as Brendan Allen against Ian Heinisch, because it was like, this guy's going to try and do the thing he's best at against the thing that this guy's the best at stopping.
Yeah. It was a real pressure
like,
fighter versus aggressive counter-puncher type of feel. Oh, these guys are going to clash.
Yeah. But, like, this one is... how does Brendan Allen make his approach work against someone who is, like, genuinely very, very well-rounded and has an extremely functional approach?
Yeah.
This is the sort of... the Andre Fili type test in this division, I think.
Sean Strickland? I like that comparison. Mm-hmm.
I think I'm probably going to pick Strickland just for that reason. I still have to see, like, Allen, like, wrestle people who, like, genuinely good at it, and I have to see him, like, be able to navigate past a better takedown defense and, like, a jab than, unfortunately, Kevin Holland is willing to bear. He does. I mean, if I think of, like, Strickland being able to hold off guys like Garcia, he's generally been pretty good at stopping people from just, like, setting takedowns up on him, unless they are Kamaru Usman, who he still, like, managed to survive against.
Yeah, I mean, he was utterly defensive throughout that fight. And Usman did get him down twice. It's the last person to take Sean Strickland down at all, although granted he's not really been fighting wrestlers. Dos Santos didn't get a chance to try taking him down. Before that, it was Garcia, as you said. He took him down 3 times, but still got really, like, broadly outstruck in that fight. I don't know, because the thing is, Brendan Allen really is part of, like, that new movement, which I know you hate at your core, Phil. The idea that a fighter, like, that a specialist sometimes is best suited to just completely eschew part of MMA. You know, to the extent that Khabib did, where for years and years and years, people had lots and lots of valid criticisms of Khabib's, of what little we saw of Khabib's striking game. And it just, you were a fool. You know, we were fools to latch on to those things because the construction of his style and his awareness of how it worked made it so that none of those things were ever that big an issue. And Brendan Allen, likewise, will just get hit and just run forward and, like, just sort of slop onto you. You know what I mean? Like, it's a really, really aggressive, insistent approach. He knows exactly what he needs to be doing to winning, and I don't think he's going to fuck around willingly at range. So, like, I think it's now a much more of a two true outcome fight than one in which both fighters will get to do their thing and we'll see who's better. And I don't know if I think Sean Strickland is powerful enough to keep Brendan Allen off of him for 3 rounds. He's sharp, but when people really pressure Sean Strickland, that's when he gets into trouble. And I don't think Brendan Allen's particularly good at it, but I do think he's particularly, devoted to doing it. So I think I'm going to take Brendan Allen. Even though I love Sean Strickland, it just feels like...
Fair enough.
Yeah, it just feels like the right shape.
Yeah, I mean, Strickland's been beaten by some pretty unstructured people before. I mean, primarily ZDS.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, I think, there's obviously just like a... I think Strickland very much like requires people to be at physical parity with him.
Yes.
Like when people have really, really heavily gone after him, he has sort of crumbled a bit. So yeah, I think he might be onto something there, but I'm going to stick with him.
I do think he has some forgiving physical parity here. Like, I don't think Brendan Allen is that kind of athlete, nor is Strickland a bad athlete. He's not. It's not like
might
the.
Be worth, Actually, I might change my pick. You know why?
No, that means he's gonna lose. Brendan Allen's gonna lose now. Why?
Middleweight.
The what?
Middleweight.
Middleweight. And so what? Being a guy who's really good at...
Yeah, Strickland's always fought at pretty much always fought at welterweight, right? He's big welterweight.
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah, if he's going up against like a really determined grappler, he's often struggled with people who just bum rush him.
Right. He says he feels great, but he also has yet to face somebody who's going to bring what has historically been not the easiest style to overcome in a division where it has more of an advantage. That's another good point.
You've swayed me, Connor, you son of a bitch.
Sweet.
Guaranteeing. Sure. Well, I mean, you like Sean Strickland, so
I do.
You've guaranteed his win. Well done.
Yeah, it was all an op all along. All right, congrats, Sean, on your big win. Brendan, better luck next time. Let's talk about last weekend's card. We're done. We can move beyond this incredibly stacked card. John Kavanaugh, seal of approval on this upcoming card. So we need to say no more about it. Let's go ahead and talk about the old man, Glover Teixeira. He was tired, Phil, from a long day. Scraping the flat top. No one actually ordered any food that day, so he was just scraping it all day. He mopped the floors, the greasy, disgusting tile floors, tiles that look like the back of Safarov's head. He wiped down the stainless steel counters and all the vinyl stools and the booths. He just blasted a couple rails of Coke behind the dumpster with the cooks. And he showed up, and he had exactly the same fight he has had for his last 6 fights, only this time with the UFC light heavyweight champion, Thiago Santos. Glover Teixeira, at 41 years old, did it again, Phil. I don't know. I felt so good seeing him win, even though I love Thiago as well. There's something so endearing about Glover Teixeira. I mean, I guess it's that he is permanently an underdog. Just like the way his fights now appear is that he gets hurt and he has to always come back. So it makes him very endearing. I already just like Glover. I think he also just seems like a swell guy, to be honest. He seems very sweet. And I don't know about how did you feel about this result? How surprised were you, and how elated did it make you feel?
I think it was more bittersweet for me.
Wow.
Because I still want the dream of Thiago Santos against Jan Blachowicz for the UFC light heavyweight title, or even Thiago Santos against Adesanya, which would be hilarious.
I mean, there's also the fact that we probably won't even get Glover versus Jan for the title, which I would also love to see.
Yeah, we're probably just going to get... Yeah, there's a solid chance we get Glover versus, like, Adesanya or something. I mean, almost certainly what we'll actually get is that Adesanya will take so long to fight anyone.
That Glover will lose.
Glover will just lose to someone, yeah. Yep. This is much more likely.
I think you're right.
So yeah, pretty So I felt bittersweet, but I mean, this was also just an incredible fight and example of who both these guys are. I mean, in all the best and worst ways.
Yeah.
Because in a weird way, it was. Neither of these gentlemen are particularly young. I mean, Thiago is not actually young himself.
No, he's just not.
He's 36.
Yeah.
Glover's 41. But I still think this might be in the running for the Patrick Wyman Memorial Award for Explosive Muscularity.
What?
Because this fight was just power shots and these two guys hurting each other and fucking each other up for the entirety of the fight.
It's true. The contrast in round 3 on the ground is something to behold. The fact that it literally goes from being a 10-8 round for one guy to being a 10-8 round for the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
That's not supposed to be possible.
Yeah.
There were some really stark momentum shifts in this fight.
Yeah, and it felt like no matter what your read was on this fight, you're probably right in some way.
Yeah, it happened. Whatever it was you expected, it did happen at some point.
Yeah. You're like, oh man, if I can trust Thiago's ability to throw shit away against someone like Glover. Yep, that was right. You're like, how does Glover close people down without getting really badly hurt? And you're like, he doesn't.
Yeah. He just, walks through it. I do think that... Well, let me get your opinion first. What did you think of Thiago's grappling and wrestling? Was this what you expected? This what you would have liked to expect? Or do you think that it took a hit from his layoff?
I think it's pretty much sort of what I would expect. It's sort of what I expected, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the problem with Thiago is that he sells out on stuff rather than this is it's sort of what we mentioned with the RDA versus Chucky Olive's analogy, is that so much of what Thiago does is exploding out of ground situations, and so much of what Glover does is just not allowing people to do that at all.
Yeah.
In terms of giving up the takedown, I don't know. I think Thiago probably thought that Glover was pretty much dead that first one, and Glover just drove through after that. Was it a left hand or a right hand that he threw? I forget. The first phase shifting shot, and it was just like a great takedown that took Thiago off guard. And after that, he was clearly very worried.
Yeah, let's see it. Well, the first takedown he gets dropped. That's the one where Glover just sort of falls on his face for a moment and then has to scramble through and collect the legs. Yeah. So you mean the one after that?
Yeah.
Meaning in round 2. Let's see. I know this is very exciting podcasting. Yeah, it's a classic overhand right to double leg. Yeah, not even it also looks like Glover set up his takedown variety a little better in this fight. Yeah. So I don't know. I do think Dominic Cruz on the commentary raised the point that when you do knee rehab, your wrestling is the last thing you get to work on. You get to start with striking because you can do it with no contact or resistance other than your own body. You can do that for a while you're rehabbing. wrestling is the last thing you get to do because it puts a tremendous strain on your knees and is heavy resistance, and people are going to be landing on you and stuff like that. And it did. I don't know. I do think usually, despite Glover looking like he was well prepared to take this to the ground, and why wouldn't he be? That's how he wins all of his fights these days. I was a little surprised with how easily Thiago was taken down. He offered virtually no resistance to the shots. Like, I'd be interested to look at fight metric, but I'm not sure that Glover shot all that more compared to the takedowns he actually completed.
Yeah, I mean, Thiago's such a weird defensive grappler, though.
Right.
I think he's probably, like, how many shot takedowns have we seen Thiago stop in his career?
Well, a few. I mean, all I'm saying is that I agree. It did look like something that we talked about last week. It looked like just the top game, stylistically and technically, of Glover Teixeira. Just didn't allow him to explode and create scrambles the way he has in the past. But he didn't, nor did he keep the scrambles going when he was taken down. And that is what I usually do expect out of Thiago Santos, is that, when the moment comes that he's losing his balance, he is a maelstrom of just energy, just bursting out of the control position before it can ever be established. And he didn't do that. He just kind of got taken down and accepted guard and didn't really, didn't seem to make much of an effort to get out of that. He looked rusty on the ground to me. That's my take.
I mean, I think it's just like, that Glover is just he's just a different kind of guy.
He is,
I think his top control is better. His shot takedowns are better. We've always seen Thiago have shoes on the floor against guys.
Yes.
Like Spicely or Musasi or whatever.
Right.
It's just the things that make Thiago work as a fighter, also the things which make him don't work, which is why I love him so much.
Of course, yeah.
That he was totally selling out on everything to knock Glover out, and came very close to doing so. I mean, shockingly accurate, despite how slow Glover is. The amount that Thiago was nailing him, and when he face planted Glover, I was like, oh, that's it.
Yep. Twice Glover survived being knocked down. Twice.
Yeah, so I think I said this in a tweet, about the last round, where it was when it was after a 10-8 round, Thiago's corner pleads with him not to grapple with Glover, and he knocks him down, immediately leaping into guard with the pure, unhesitating joy of a freshly bathed Labrador puppy diving into the first muddy puddle it sees.
That was a very, very good analogy. That is 100% Thiago Santos. That's why I love him. It's not because he is a malicious or horrible murderer at heart, but he's so happy about what he's doing.
Yeah.
He's like a scenery chewing villain, Like, oh, this guy's here. Palpatine is in the room. Everyone, look. He's going to do some monster face stuff.
He was just like, whatever, don't grapple with him, and he knocks him down. He's like, kill! Just leaps on him.
So happy to drink this old man's blood. He just didn't think for a second. I think I guess I have to agree. That I maybe expected more. Maybe there could have been a little more. I just want to say real quick before we wrap up, one more time. Glover Teixeira actually looked like he was well prepared for this fight too. It's not just me thinking Thiago was surprisingly unprepared for these takedowns. Like I said before, that double leg from Glover is nice. He's not always that good of a shot wrestler, especially not at this age. He's always been the snatch single guy in this division who just sort of bends over and grabs your leg. But they were some well-timed and set up shots. It looked prepared. So credit to Glover. There was small talk about him fighting Jan. If Israel Adesanya is not going to be ready in a certain amount of time. That's what Blachowicz said. I hope they do that. Just do it. Because really there's no difference between Adesanya winning his second title over Jan or Glover. Who gives a shit? So don't hold up this division so that you can have yet another, at this point, utterly meaningless 2-division champion. Like, I'm fine with him doing that. Just wait. Let Glover have his shot,
I agree. And, as we've said before, there's a significant chance Glover Teixeira can beat Jan Blachowicz. I mean,
yeah,
he can put him back into the Patrick Cummins box.
Yeah, absolutely. So, congratulations, Glover. I love you. I'm sorry the business is still going to be seized by eminent domain to put up in a parking garage. Yeah.
Glover, no matter how well he does, how successfully he does, it is fate that the restaurant must always be struggling.
Glover's restaurant is a sort of Dorian Gray's portrait, It sort of suffers in equal measure to how well he's doing in his UFC career. So yeah, the business is actually bankrupt now that he's got this win. Sorry, buddy. Worse luck next time, I guess. Let's take one more break. When we come back, what else happened on this card? Oh yeah, Hani Barcelos. We told you to watch him. Hopefully you did it, because it was awesome. And whatever else happened on this card, we're going to cover it all after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
And we are back for our closing, impromptu fight smorgasbord is sort of what we're doing here. Andrei Arlovski versus Tanner Boser. Phil, thoughts?
This was a better performance from Tanner Boser than I expected, in that I expected him to lose an absolutely terrible fight, and he did, but I thought he kind of won it.
Yeah. I know, I actually think this was the one time that somebody has lost to Arlovski where, because of the heavyweight curve, I do not think that they have officially marked themselves out as, not possibly a prospect. Because I don't know, because Boser has already got so much better compared to when he first came to the UFC. He already made significant changes, I think, in how effective he was, and lost weight, and so yeah, it was all right.
There's a physical ceiling on him, but that was always there. No one was there thinking oh yeah, this guy's going to beat Curtis Blades.
Of course, yeah, but he's quick, so it makes up for the fact that he's not all that imposing. There are still a lot of big, slow, dumb heavyweights he can beat. And the one thing Andrei Arlovski is not is dumb. He still comes in each fight with something prepared.
Often a terrible, terrible fight.
Yes. Usually that's the only kind that he actually wins. And mostly the only kind he has these days. Love him. True legend. All right, let's talk really about the one that I wanted to discuss. We said last week, we were pretty hyped about this one, actually. In fact, after you and I discussed it, I was very excited for this fight, to the extent that I had completed the cycle and fully prepared myself to be disappointed by the time the first round was about to begin. And about 2 minutes in, I realized that our excitement had not been misplaced. It was not only an exhibition of how good Hani Barcelos is, and the grave misfortune he has of being, in this division where he's not even had the chance to fight a ranked opponent yet. Not only was it a demonstration of that, but it was also just a banger, which is the other thing we anticipated, because Khalid Taha absolutely throws down. He's very tough. He hits super hard. And while Zane, that idiot, would correctly point out that he has no range boxing skills, he is actually like a well-put-together pocket boxer. He throws good combinations. I was also super impressed with his wrestling and his grappling in this fight. And despite all of that, despite him showing up way better than I expected, I was still managed to come away very impressed with Hani Barcelos, because he's still, I think that the defining thing I said about him last week was adaptive. or intelligent. And I think that really came through in this fight as well. He picks up on the things that are working and figures out how to leverage them into making other tactics more effective. He's a very, Phil, to borrow your terminology, he's a very granular fighter. And when he sees that a shot is having an effect on you, he uses that as his wedge to then expand the entire rest of his game, which is very, well-rounded and multifaceted.
Yeah, because, I mean, this was one of those fights where we saw him, building a really diverse, complicated game from scratch throughout the fight. Started off really slow paced, basically just kind of front kicks and jabs, just kind of seeing what Taha was doing, letting Taha flurry a lot, just not doing much at all. And then eventually building out into, and I was wondering, at the beginning I was thinking, is he parceling out his offense too little?
Mm-hmm.
Is he going to get stuck into a thing where Taha's going to be able to potentially steal rounds with a blitz or something like this? But instead, he just sort of kept adding layers onto his offense, be it takedowns. Some of the combinations he was hitting were ridiculous.
Yeah, and totally organic, right? They do not look like textbook, not even if it doesn't even look like he has a unique textbook at his team. It looks like he's coming up with them on the fly, and as a result of what he has seen in this particular fight. I'm sure he has certain patterns and courses laid out in his head from training, familiar sort of connecting pieces, but weird combinations in addition to just 8 strikes long and very impressive to look at. Unorthodox pairings of what strike follows another.
Yeah,
go on.
Using knees in the middle, he would go from knees to punching combinations, mixing in low kicks. His defense was mixed in there.
Yep.
Has a pretty intelligent high guard that he's happy to counter off. He was pivoting into hook counters.
Yep. All of it.
Super pretty. And then just all blended together. Super nice. Obviously still a fantastic grappler, but as you said, the nice wrestling as well. But also, credit to Taha.
Yeah.
For just being being insanely gritty and having disgusting cardio for the amount of power that the man clearly has.
Right.
He must have trained his arse off for this fight.
He came across as a truly imposing physical presence. I think I have to give credit to his thinking and his technique to some degree, but honestly, he just horsed out of some control positions from Barcelos, who is a very good back control grappler. In general, is a good control-oriented grappler. And he also made Barcelos work really hard in the clinches, where Barcelos does have some nice chain wrestling abilities and everything. It was so impressive physically from Taha that it was entirely, in my mind, a product of Barcelos' thinking that he won this fight as convincingly as he did. Because if he had just gone in there and not been able to adapt or change, Taha was terrifying in this fight. He kept coming. Every time he got hit, he would just fire back with a combination, not just a single strike, and he just couldn't be controlled. He wouldn't there was no way to burn his energy. You had to trade energy with him. That was very impressive. Barcelos is he's like a canon, or an EDM song even, where just the one instrument comes in and then the other instrument comes in and it just builds and builds and builds, one piece at a time until you have this whole symphony of techniques. And, the thing is that pattern is not even unique to this fight. That is how Hani Barcelos beat Said Nurmagomedov. And in that one, Nurmagomedov is much more of a thinking fighter like him, so it didn't have the same tenor as this one, but the same pattern for Barcelos is there. Like, the margins were thinner, but slow start. Let's put things out there. First of all, let's rely on defense for a minute, something very few MMA fighters feel comfortable doing. Let's let this guy show me what he wants to do. And, against Nurmagomedov, it was like, okay, he's already thrown a dozen spinning attacks. I guess I better start coming up with an answer to that. And, of course, by the end of round 3, he's timing those spins and turning them into takedowns. And this comes after having already done that in round 2, but then he couldn't complete the takedown. But by round 3, he's not only hitting and timing the takedown, he's completing it. He's also figured out the next layer of Nurmagomedov's defense. That's what kind of fighter he is. He learns. He really learns. Like, that, I think, is the core strength of his style, in addition to the fact that he is, obviously, an incredibly impressive athlete. Even at 33, he's very fast. Very fast. So, yeah, Barcelos rocks, I just wanted to take this chance to just praise him and talk about how fun and exciting the fight was. And if you haven't seen it, it's probably the best fight on a card that was overall pretty good.
Yeah. This is a... it was a tiny bit more competitive. This should still be, I think, on Fight of the Year. Like, people... I don't know if it's not going to be Fight of the Year, but it should be considered, I think, because This was just in terms of a showcase of techniques, in some ways this was the fight that people sold Adesanya Gastelum as being. This is one guy, the stocky guy who's coming after the technician and just won't stop. Mm-hmm. But it's a lot more fun and genuinely, despite the 30-27 cards,
very competitive
a lot more
throughout.
Back and forth.
Yes, yeah, it's one of those. It's like I don't know, I was gonna say Cormier Barnett, but even that, that's my go-to example of a fight that is not as lopsided as the scorecards make it seem. But this was more competitive. You're going to see somebody work their ass off for that 30-27 scorecard. Very rewarding fight to watch. So go check it out if you haven't seen it already. Raoni Barcelos should get a ranked opponent. He should have gotten one after he beat Said Nurmagomedov, to be honest. But it's bantamweight. So maybe next he'll get to fight Cody Stamann or someone, and break in. But I do think he is a very good fighter, and he doesn't have much time left. He's been fighting for 7 or 8 years, and he's 33. So, time to get him in those ranked matchups now. Okay, last couple words, and we'll do this very quickly, which means prepare yourselves for another 30 minutes of discussion. Did you have any thoughts on Giga Chikadze? He's clearly the UFC's Michael Venom Page, and that he just keeps getting fed cans.
That's
it.
But he looks genuinely pretty decent. It's just, I would like to see him fight someone good now.
I think the only thing I'll say is that in this fight, he seemed to have gotten over a specific thing that Zane and I both complained about on the Vivi last week, which was that we were like, you know what? I think in a similar way to Kevin Holland, where he'd be really good if he just wasn't trying to be funny the whole time, Giga Chikadze would be...
people out.
What?
I don't mind. Sorry.
What?
I didn't... No, it's... I remember his last fight, he was spending the entire time trying to knock Omar Morales out.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. That's exactly it. Yeah. Kevin Holland is limiting himself with his silly behavior. Giga Chikadze limits himself because he wants the most spectacular highlight KO. And will just look for these outrageous unorthodox techniques and stuff for the entirety of a fight that he is otherwise pretty comfortably controlling. So I think it has the effect of making these pretty comfortable performances look frustrating and unimpressive. Mm-hmm. And in this fight, I don't think he did that as much. I still don't know how much I can take away from him knocking out Jamie Simmons, but he did just sort of succinctly knock him out with a nice, well set up head kick, body kick to head kick, classic shit, nothing flashy. And the sound it made was one of the most disgusting things I've ever experienced in MMA. People say this kind of stuff figuratively all the time. It literally sounded like a home run, like a baseball bat cracking a ball, including the echo. And that was the sound of a man's shin colliding with another man's head. yeah, we'll see. I want to see Giga Chikadze tested. No surprise there. Final word, though. Yan Xiaonan versus Claudia Gadelha. Final referendum on Claudia? Phil, I think it's in fact well overdue to call this the final referendum. She's not going to solve her problems. That's kind of where she would have to make somebody asked me on Twitter, what if she went to flyweight? Would that fix her cardio issues? I think, frankly, the main thing with Claudia is mental. She starts her fights really, really tense and has not so far managed to train that out of herself, or no one has managed to train it out of her. And I think probably connected to that, she seems to have like an extremely one-track mind. Like, this is the thing that it stood out to me before, but particularly in this fight, she can't adjust. Can you think of one time in her career Claudia Gadelha has made a significant adjustment in the course of one fight? Right? She's never made an adjustment between one round and the next. She can't do it. And I think it's tied to the same things that make her burn all of her energy and waste her energy. I just don't think she's calm and relaxed and capable of like thinking and really genuinely reacting intelligently in a fight. And I think that could be changed. I never want to say change isn't possible, but it really is at a point where it's like, it's not on a par with like changing as a person. It would be changing as a person for Claudia Gadelha. Something fundamental. So she would need like to move to a new camp. And fighters have every reason not to do that. People talk about it like it's easy but like people have more than their careers to worry about. And, I'm sure Claudia Gadelha is settled in wherever she is and has friends and family and stuff that she wants to spend time with. So I'm just going to go ahead and say, because of all those factors, this is the fight that convinces me Claudia Gadelha is not going to get over her issues ever.
This is she's having the same fight that she's sort of fighting a very similar person to Angela Hill.
Yep.
But she's doing worse.
Yeah.
So she's getting solved more over time. And yeah, she's, as you said, she's not solving anything. Like, I think it's the tension, it's the fact that she's just a mechanically incredibly inefficient fighter in general. Like, she's always like poured her punches.
Yeah.
But she's been able to like overcome that. She was able to overcome that because she was a really impressive athlete for the division. She's not a really impressive athlete for the division. Everyone has just anymore. Like, everyone has just gotten better at strength and conditioning. Like, in
that's true. That has been that has been a noticeable trend in this division.
Like, if you just look physically at Angela Hill when she started in the UFC, you're just like, oh shit, this person is like visibly like bigger and more powerful.
She got stronger. Carla Esparza got stronger. Everyone got noticeably more beefed up.
And then you're like, and people who used to be strong, like considered like super strong, like Delia, or people just used to be considered like pretty strong, like Karanina Kovalkiewicz, have just been left in the dust.
Yeah. You're right. Kovalkiewicz blown out. Gadelha, who actually is a good athlete, is still, clinging to relevancy.
Yeah.
Good point.
And that's pretty much it. Like, this was bad. I mean, they mentioned it on the podcast, which means it must have been really noticeable. They were just saying that even when they interviewed them, they just didn't feel like Gadelha really wanted to like be there.
Yeah. I don't think it's fun. It's not fun at all. And she never gets to have that catharsis that our true Lionhearts get to have, She just she enjoys the first 3 minutes of a fight. And that's the way it's been for years. On the flip side, Yan Xiaonan is pretty fucking good. I think she's probably got a physical ceiling in this newly athletically stacked division. But technically, as a boxer, I actually really, really, really liked what she was doing. She's, listeners of the show will know that both Phil and I love fighters who do the jab. And it was like that was the entire fight. She just jabbed Gadelha up. Her footwork was really nice. Like she was using that jab to create these angles without having to just run away from Gadelha. Not that Gadelha was all that insistent after the first couple minutes. And she also had a really nice backstepping counter. And it wasn't just one punch. It was the backstep that sort of defined the counter more than which punch she threw, because she did it with both a right hand and a left hook. I think she did it with an uppercut at one point. But she would engage with a 1-2 and then, to draw out Gadelha's counters, because that's the direction Gadelha's game has shifted, right, is into more of a counter-punching approach. And Gadelha had a little success with counters. She has definitely gotten better at that. But once Xiaonan started to feel those counters coming back at her, she then started to pop Gadelha with quick, deliberately powerless punches, take a back step out, let the counter miss, and then refill that space with her own shots, whether it was a hook or the right hand or whatever. Just a smart boxing performance, which I always like to see. So,
yeah, I mean, there was a point where she did I think she feinted a 2-punch combination, and then Gadelha was like, okay, something's definitely come here, and he just threw a punch into open air. And I think the mental damage against someone like Gadelha is probably at least as useful as the physical damage of actually punching her.
Yes.
So yeah, very nice.
Yep. All right, well, I think that is all we want to talk about. There was actually some other stuff of note, like Garagori versus Elkins. Maybe Garagori could turn into something, or maybe it's just a sign of just how predictably beat-upable Darren Elkins is. Alexander Romanov, heavyweight of significance. Not a terrible card, all things considered, which is why we spent so much more time talking about it, I think, than we did anything else other than the main event set for next week. So hopefully next week's overperforms just as much, if not more so than this last one did. It's going to need to, I think, to be a really good time. We will be back after that to discuss what's our next upcoming card. Figueiredo versus Perez, which is not going to get any hype whatsoever, and the co-main event, Shevchenko versus Maia. So no one else will be watching this event, but we will, and I'm actually, it looks pretty good. So it's a good one for the nerds among us, which Lord knows means our entire audience. Phil, anything to plug before we call it a day?
So I think this week that podcast with Dan Tom over on the Protect Your Neck podcast should be coming out.
That's right.
So keep an eye out for that. The stuff I've read relative to the stuff we were talking about on the podcast today, my other partner in crime, David Castillo, wrote a piece over on Buddy Elbow called "Why Aren't We Talking About Honey Barcelos?"
Yeah, he stole my obvious fucking idea.
Hmm?
He stole my obvious idea. I would have put out a little quick op-ed. Now I have to look at him technically if I want to write about Barcelos, which I do. But
you are the Conor McGregor is to fight bookings. You are to articles at this point, Conor.
What do you mean?
You know, like when Conor McGregor is like, "Oh, I almost fought Edgar. Oh, I almost fought RDA." I mean, he's listing all these fights that were totally going to happen.
I literally pitched it. Okay, Phil, I pitched it. And then the next day I saw that fucking article. So fuck you, Dave Castillo, you piece of shit.
This is just what Connors do.
They never should have rehired that David Castillo, you know? Get the hell
already
out of
stealing
here.
your thunder.
Yeah, it's bullshit. I do like it. It does actually gives me an insight into how Conor McGregor must feel. Like I am now, just vicariously, full of seething jealousy. David Castillo is being talked about instead of me. Wow.
Kane and Hooker, Conor. That'll make you feel better.
Yeah. Well, I am working on the Hani Barcelos article, but Lord knows if that'll come out or not. If it does, it's going to be more technically focused. I'll probably just talk about a couple of his specific adaptations because I do think that's the thing that really sets him apart from so many of the other bantamweights is that he's smart. So look out for that this week. Really the best place to do that would be on my Twitter feed. That way, you'll see the links if it comes out. And if it doesn't come out, which is eminently likely, then you just simply won't have to worry about it. You'll just have to mute me for all of my other terrible tweets. You can find all of those at Boxing Bush, B-U-S-C-H. That's my handle on the twitter.com. And Phil is at Evil Greg Jackson. And make sure you find those articles mentioned and both of our work on bloodyelbow.com. Make sure you check out our Patreon. I'm going to try to get some boxing commentaries out, by the way, on the Patreon. We've had some good shit lately. There was a Juan Francisco Estrada fight. I've done one of his before, but I love him. He's one of my favorite fighters in the world to watch, and I still haven't seen that fight. Alexander Usyk fought Derek Chisora. Of course, we had Vasyl Lomachenko versus... what's the guy's name? I know him. I'm forgetting. I'm blanking. I'm tired. That's it, okay? This has been Heavy Hands. Bye. Is that a good ending?
I'm so impressed by the level of crankiness.
I just realized I was not going to save it. I was really sick of hearing the sound of my own voice.
The cranky defeat.
It's done.